All right, so we're going to start our Tree of Life class for this evening. And we've been talking about the tzaddik being the foundation, being yesod, and where we're going to go tonight is that the tzaddik limits himself. That the tzaddik limits himself. And there's a great deal of this in this teaching in Judaism, that this is Ein Sof. Ein Sof, it means the infinite one. The infinite one. And so this speaks to God prior to creation. That he's known as Ein Sof. Ein Sof means that he is limitless. So what do we mean by infinite?
Without beginning, without...
Okay, so when Buzz Lightyear says to infinity and beyond is problematic. Okay, not that Pixar or whatever is so scientifically accurate and correct. But can you go beyond infinity? No. Technically, you cannot go beyond infinity. Technically, how many remember the commercial where they're saying infinity? The kids around the table and they're saying infinity plus infinity, right? And then the little girl goes infinity times infinity, and the guy goes mind blown.
Or like Buzz Lightyear, to infinity and beyond.
Yes. So.
Sorry.
We discussed that.
Oh, sorry, it was a question.
Been there, done that, got the t-shirt, we're moving on. Alright, so anyway. Love you. So, can there be infinity plus infinity or infinity times infinity? No. Not with true infinity. Something that is infinite is infinite. With true infinity, here's the truth about true infinity. The truth about true infinity is if in the existence of infinity, nothing else can exist. Nothing else can exist. And this really is mind-blowing for us. It is hard for us to conceptualize this. It's hard for us to get our mind around this fact. That when it says, in the beginning, God, Reshit Elohim, in the beginning, God, before creation, all that exists is God. All that exists is God. And in this infinite form, in the Ein Sof form, there are no descriptors for Him. There are no defining terms for Him. Why? Why would there be no defining terms for Him? So we studied this a ways back on our Judaism 101 class on Shabbat afternoon. Why would there be no defining terms? Because the moment you begin to define something, you limit that. For example, if I tell you, pay attention here, if I tell you that I have something in my pocket, what is it? I have something in my pocket. Wrong. I have something in my pocket. Huh?
Is it black?
Hmm?
Is it square?
I'm giving you no definition. I'm just telling you I have something in my pocket.
Keys.
Let me go another direction. Let's say this. Let me say that there is something. There is something. That's all the definition you have. Let's remove the pocket. Let's go to this one. There is something. That's all the definition you have. What is it? Now, in effect, I've already limited it because to be a thing means what? It has physical form. So, in effect, I've already limited it. Correct? But you have no idea. Now, watch the way this works, okay? Because I'm going to limit. Right now, it is fairly limitless. It could be anything. If I tell you it is something, but it could be anything, correct? Stay with me. Correct? Alright, so now I'm going to tell you that it is something large. Now, by telling you that it is large, what have I done? I have limited it. How? Because it cannot be what? It cannot be small. Thus, it has become limited. So, is it any longer infinite? No. It has just become limited. The more I define it, the more limited it becomes. For example, let me tell you that it is large and it is gray. So if it is large, it cannot be small. If it is gray, it cannot be what? Any other color. It must be this color. Now let me limit it even further and tell you that it has 4 feet. It is large, it is gray, and it has 4 feet. Now if it has 4 feet, meaning what? It does not have 2, it does not have 6, it has 4. So we have limited it even further. So, by those terms, by that definition, you should already know, you should already have an idea. Say it loud. An elephant. Very good. How many of you were thinking an elephant? Okay? So, it's large, it's gray, it has 4 feet. Now, if I tell you that it is an elephant, now how much more is it limited? Because now what? It is an elephant, it cannot be anything else. See how it is very defined, how definition limits, takes away the infiniteness of something. Now there's a reason to this and what that has to do with Yesod and what that has to do with the Tzaddik. And actually it has to do with the wondrousness of our even being here. Because in the beginning all that existed was God and He was infinite. He was without infinite. He's limitless. Watch. He's without boundaries and borders. There's no edge. There's no line. There's no, he's boundless. In saying all of this, in saying that he's limitless, that he's infinite, that he's boundless, what can we say? Time, space, what else? Matter. Do not exist. These things do not exist. Why do they not exist? Why does time not exist? Why does space not exist? Why does matter not exist? Because, yes, because that would make limitation. How can they exist in this form? They can't exist. As long as He is in this form, this cannot exist. Which means you and I cannot exist. Because if all there is God, and He is infinite, It's not just that he's without beginning and without ending. But there's no universe. There's no other dimension. There's no anything. There's nothing except for God. That's all there is. It's just he and himself. One of the cool things about this, that there is nothing else except for God, is that God is not dependent upon anything for his existence. He exists in and of himself. And there's not anything that is necessary for God to exist. It is not that God needs anything to exist. It is that we need God to exist in order for us to exist. But because of this very fact that he is infinite, that he is limitless, that he is without boundary, that he is without border, that then there is, you can't really use the term room in infinity, but there is no room for anything else to exist in true infinity. So we have a problem. If God is infinite, if he is truly infinite, we have a problem. And what is this problem? This problem is, how do we come into the picture? How does creation come about? How does the universe come about? If there is no room, if there is no time, there is no space, there is no matter, then how do we come about? And the answer to that is this, an expression called, in Hebrew called Tzimtzum. Everyone say Tzimtzum. And Tzimtzum roughly means to make place. To make room. So when you have in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, in the beginning, God. Now my mom taught us when we were little, in class, that this was a pointer. In the beginning, God. The whole verse says what? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. But the first words are what? In the beginning, God. Saying what? That in the beginning, he is all that exists. Pre-creation, all that exists is God. That's this whole idea here. So then you have created the heavens and the earth. What happens? How can that happen in this situation, in this circumstance? And so the sages tell us, okay, well, in reality, it cannot. If it's true infinity, it cannot happen. Unless this takes place, Tzimtzum. What? Except that God makes room. He makes place. He makes a place for us to exist. In order to make a place for us to exist, if he is truly infinite, in order for him to make a place, room for us to exist, what does he have to do? He has to move some of himself out of the way. He has to move some of himself out of the way in order for us to exist. Another part of this concept that he has to make, that he has to push part of himself out of the way in order for us to exist. Where then are we going to exist? Well, he's without boundary and he is without border. Correct? He's without boundary, he's without border. Are you with me?
Yes.
Then where are you going to exist?
Inside, surrounded.
Within him. Very good. You're going to exist inside of him. This is the whole idea of Tzimtzum. And an excellent demonstration of Tzimtzum is a woman who is expecting a child. Did the child exist prior to conception?
No.
No. The child came into being. Did the mother exist prior to the child's conception? Yes. So the mother would in effect be, to use the analogy here, would be infinite, would be the infinite one. For example, I know nothing about my mother's life prior to my coming into the world, other than what she has told me. I only know of her life, of what she has told me of her life. You understand what I'm saying? I know nothing else about her, other than what she has revealed to me concerning her life. Why? Because I did not exist then. I did not exist there. And in fact, there was not room for me there. In order for me to exist, Mother had to make room for me to exist. That is, her body made room. Upon conception, the mother will make tzimtzum. She will do tzimtzum. She will make, the body will make a place where? With outside? Within. And this in effect is creation. This is going from Ein Sof to Tzimtzum. That God limits Himself, He puts a limitation upon Himself in order for Him to make room for us to exist. This is one of the things about the Sefirot, about the attributes of God. Because what are the attributes of God? These are the defining terms. Chesed, Gevurah, Chochmah. These are all defining terms. Mercy, strength, wisdom. These are all defining terms. But the moment we begin to define Him, what happens? We limit Him. He loses the infiniteness in these regards. Now, does He actually lose His infinity? But it's the appearance of losing, because He has made room for us. Saying what? He is still boundless. He is still without boundaries and borders. But we live within Him. We exist within Him, saying what? The entire universe, as large and expansive as it seems, as it appears to be to us, it is only relative, and it is only in a minute portion within God. These are things that are difficult for us to conceive. But in different sciences, in different aspects of physics and such, how much, the question arises of how much the existence, the physical existence of our life here is real. When we get into quantum physics and all of these different aspects, how much of this is real? And we've discussed all of this before. The whole idea of tzimtzum, of God making room for us, is carried down. That He has made a place for us to live. And this is what we call grace. In Hebrew, chen. This is what we call grace. What do we mean grace? That God does not have to have us in order for Him to exist. God exists with or without us. For example, the mother who is expecting a child. Does the mother expecting a child Can the mother exist with or without the child?
Yes.
Yes. Can the child exist with or without the mother? No. The child must have the mother. This is in effect our relationship with God. That He is the infinite one, even as my mother, as far as I know, has had no beginning. In other words, I did not see. I only know of her from what she has spoken to me, because I was not there. Where was my first existence with her? In her womb. But she made room. Everything, her organs were moved out of the way. She made room for me within her. And so it is with our existence with God, that He was gracious enough, to make room within Himself for our existence, that He was willing to put part of Himself out of the way in order for us to exist. Now these are, in reality, very simplistic terms, because the truth is that there's no way that we can understand how all of this works. But there's a reason why I'm sharing all of this with you, and how it has to, what it has to do with Yesod, with the foundation, what it has to do with the tree of life, what it has to do with our climbing the tree of life, our advancement in spiritual terms. And that is this, that the tzaddik, the sages say that the tzaddik becomes finite and limited, that he limits himself in time and space. That he limits himself. So why is it important that the tzaddik limits himself? Because here we see what is seen to make place. What does he do? He puts limitations on himself. He limits himself so that we can exist. So what does the tzaddik do? The righteous one. What does the tzaddik do? What did I just say? He makes himself, he gives himself limitations. He limits himself. He makes himself finite. Now, I'm not the one who says this. This is what the Chazal, what the sages say, the Jewish sages say. That he limits himself where? In time and in space. That the tzaddik limits himself in time and in space. And we see this in the tzaddik of Mashiach. We see this in Yeshua. That he limited himself. Why? Why does the tzaddik limit himself? Because God limited himself. As God limited himself, so the tzaddik, because the tzaddik is created in the image of God, created in the shadow, as the shadow of God. So that as what God would do, so the tzaddik does, so the righteous one does. What God will do, the righteous one will follow suit, will also do. Do those words, does that bring anything to mind concerning Yeshua? What does Yeshua say concerning his own will, concerning himself?
Not my rules.
That I did not come to do my own will, I have come to do the will of the one who sent me. He also says that he sees what the Father does, and he also does that. Well, this is exactly what the sages say that the tzaddik will do. That the tzaddik gets his instruction, gets his orders, his directive, his direction from God. And that is what the tzaddik would do. I have here a laptop. Does the laptop act on its own accord? Or is it necessary for instruction to be inputted into the laptop? Come on.
Instruction.
Does a laptop act of its own accord, or is it necessary to put instruction into the laptop? Instruction. The laptop will only act upon instruction. Now, we can say that it is artificial intelligence. Girls, please. We can say that it is artificial intelligence and all of these things. But the truth of the matter is that all of the instruction is already inputted into the computer. It's already there in the hard drive and such. Code, it's all there. Now all I have to do is click a button, correct? Move the mouse, click a button, and all of these kinds of things, and it is so simple to me. I do not realize what instruction I'm actually giving to it, but I am giving the computer instructions. This is the way it is, in effect, as an analogy, this is the way it is with the tzaddik and God. The tzaddik does nothing of himself. The tzaddik waits for the instruction of the Father, of God, and then follows that instruction. And this was the life of Yeshua. Yeshua did nothing of his own accord. He only did that which the Father instructed him to do. Why? Because he is Salam, he is B'Tselem, in the image, Elohim, of God. He is the shadow. Salam means shadow. He is the shadow of God. Your shadow only does what you do. It only moves when you move. And so the tzaddik is very literally within that placement, that the tzaddik, the righteous one, is the shadow, is the shadow of God, is the image of God, so that it follows exactly the instruction that God gives to it. The information that God gives to the tzaddik is the information that the tzaddik will follow. And this is what Yeshua is saying. That he did not do his will, but he did the will of the one who sent him. That he did not that he did not what's the term I'm looking for here? He did not want, he looked to the Father. He looked to the Father. And what he saw the Father doing, that's what he did. And so he sees the Father, Ein Sof, in creation, infinite, boundless, without borders, without boundaries. He sees the Father do what? Contract, make room within himself for the existence of creation. So the tzaddik does what he sees the Father doing. So what does the tzaddik do? What does Yeshua do? He contracts. He also does tzimtzum. He makes place. He makes room for others. And this is where Philippians chapter 2 verses 5 through 8 come into play. So if you would look at that portion of Scripture. Philippians chapter 2, verses 5 through 8. He says, have this attitude in yourself, which also was in Mashiach Yeshua. What does he mean? Have this attitude in yourself, which also was in Mashiach Yeshua. This is B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God. As Yeshua is following the movement of God, the instruction of God, so we follow Yeshua. Saying what? So if you would, we have God, and He's going this way. We have Yeshua, the Mashiach, and so He's doing what He sees the Father doing, so what? He's going this way. So now we have you and me, and what? We see Yeshua, who is following the Father, going this way, so what? We're going this way. Rav Shaul, the Apostle Paul, puts it this way. He says, follow after me as I follow after Mashiach. And who is Mashiach following after? Huh? God. He's following after God. So you see, when it all comes down to is what? That we're all following after God. As Yeshua Mashiach sets the example for us, as He is the shadow, He is the image of the Almighty, and He is following after Him, following His instructions. I do what I see my Father doing. And so as He is doing this, we are following. He is Radeinu, He is our Rabbi, He is our Master, Adonai, He is our Lord. Therefore what? What we see our Master doing, what we see our Rabbi doing, we also do. This is what it means, have this attitude in yourself. Have the same mindset that our Rabbi has. We've spoken to this several times, that you can tell different sects of Judaism by how they dress, how they talk, different aspects. But what I can tell you is this: they are all following, and we're talking particularly among Orthodox and ultra-Orthodox rabbis, that they are following their rabbi. So that when their rabbi, when the rabbis dress a certain way, you will find that all of the men are following suit, that they dress this way. I told you the story before because there's a certain sect of Judaism which even tie their shoe a certain way, and it is they put on their shoes and socks in a certain way, in a certain order. And a lot of people who don't understand it, they say, well, you see, that's legalism, that's just the tradition of men, but they're missing the point. I've told you this story before, how a group of Talmudim, of this rabbi, of this certain rabbi, came to him. The students of this rabbi came to him, and they loved the rabbi. They admired him, and they held him in high esteem, and they wanted to be like him. They wanted to look like him. They wanted to dress like him. Everything, even to the point that they wanted to get dressed in the same order, in the same way that he did, because this is the way it is between a rabbi and his students. And so they came to their rabbi one day and they said, Rabbi, tell us, how do you put on your shoes and socks? And so he said, well, first I put on my right sock and then I put on my left sock. And then I put on my left shoe and then I put on my right shoe. And then I tie my right shoe and then I tie my left shoe. And so this entire clan and this entire group of Orthodox men, ultra-Orthodox Jewish men, all began putting on their shoes and socks the same way, so that even today, many, many, many years later, all the men in this group still put on their shoes and socks the same way. Now we would say, well, that's foolishness, that's silliness. You're missing the point. This is exactly the way this is what he's talking about here. This is exactly what our attitude is supposed to be concerning Yeshua. That we so much want to be like him, we so love him, that even the way he would get dressed in the morning, even how he would put his sandals on, that we would want to mimic him, that we would want to do it exactly the way he did it. This is the way the Talmidim were of his day. This is the way it was with Peter and James and John and Philip and Thomas and Bartholomew and all of these men, Mattiyahu, all of them. This is the way it was with them. They lived with him 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When he got up, they got up. When he went to bed, they went to bed. When he ate, they ate. When he went out, they went out. When he came in, they came in. They were with him, they were with him, they were with him, watching him, watching him, watching him, learning, 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 so that you could tell that these were the followers of Yeshua, even though they weren't wearing crosses. They didn't wear crosses around their necks or on their rings or what have you. There was none of that. And yet they were known to be followers of Yeshua. Why? Because how he spoke, they spoke. What he did, they did. How he lived, they lived. How he dressed, they dressed. Everything that he did, they were duplicates of him. And he was a duplicate of what, so to speak? He was a duplicate of the Father. So as he's duplicating what the Father's doing, the disciples are duplicating what he's doing. All of that to say this, and we're done for this evening. All of that to say this. Look at Philippians 2, 5 through 8. Have this attitude in yourself, which also was in Mashiach Yeshua, who, though existing in the form of God, did not consider being equal to God a thing to be grasped. In other words, not highfalutin, I'm better than you, I'm God after all. If anyone had the right to be proud and arrogant and throw his weight around, it would have been Yeshua Mashiach. But he doesn't throw his weight around. He doesn't go around all arrogant and proud. Rather, what we read concerning him, what? That he is a man of absolute humility. That he's a man of grace and kindness and mercy. That he does not go around condemning people. So much so that the scripture says that what? That he did not come into the world. When he says this himself, when he's speaking to Nicodemus, that the Son of Man did not come into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. He's not a man of condemnation, but he's a man of grace, of patience, of kindness, of mercy. And so we should be mimicking him as he lived his life, so we should be living our lives as duplicates of him. So when we go throwing our weight around, that's not being a follower of Yeshua, because he did not go throwing his weight around. Rather, that is an act of egoism. That's an act of pride, of selfishness. When I'm acting all haughty and proud and arrogant and all of these things, when I'm thinking that I'm better than other people and all of these things, this is not being a follower of Yeshua. This is, in fact, being a follower of myself. So what does the next phrase say? But he emptied himself. And this is where we're going with all of this. Why? How did we start out? How did we start off? With all of this, correct? You with me? What does God do? He's infinite, limitless, without borders, without boundaries, correct? What does he do? He limits himself and makes room for us. He places limitations on himself and makes room for us. What does Yeshua Mashiach do? He sees what the Father is doing and he does the same thing. He places limitations. He imposes limitations on himself. Do you think that Mashiach, do you think that Yeshua, do you think that Jesus had to go to be executed, had to go to be crucified? Do you think that he had to do this? Or did he allow it to happen? He allowed it to happen. There's an old song that we used to sing many years ago that said he could have called 10,000 angels. He could have called 10,000 angels to remove him, to destroy the world. But what? Tzimtzum. He's watching how the Father is doing, what the Father is doing, and he duplicates that. So the Father demonstrates grace, makes tzimtzum for us, he makes a place for us, makes room for us, and treats his creation with kindness and compassion. So Yeshua, as a tzaddik, the foundation, does the same. He sees what his Father is doing and he does the same. He empties himself, of himself so to speak, to take in the instruction of the Father. To be a true follower of Yeshua, to be a Mashiachi, to be Messianic, or to be a Christian. When a Christian is one who is a follower of the Christ, who is walking the same walk, living the same lifestyle. That is literally what it is to be a Christian. That their lifestyle is the same. That their actions, their words, all that you could not tell the difference. Why? Because they're like their rabbi. As their rabbi is, so are they. As he lives, so they live. As he dresses, so they dress. As he eats, they eat. As he talks, they talk. All the way through and through. So that what? They take on the attributes of the rabbi. So that when you see them, you in effect see their rabbi. This is the reality, this is the truth of what it means when we're asked, do they see Jesus in me? That I'm willing to empty myself even as he emptied himself. He emptied himself so that they would see whom? The Father. He who has seen me, what does he say? He tells he who has seen me has seen the Father. And so it should be that we would be able to say, he who has seen me has seen Yeshua, has seen Jesus. He emptied himself. And in emptying himself, you see, this is where we're going with this. This is the difficulty of it. In effect, as a follower of Yeshua, as a follower of Jesus, I lose my self-identity and I take on his identity. Even as he lost his self-identity and he took on the Father's identity. In effect, you could say he lost his self-awareness to take on the perspective of God. And this is what we're called to do, to lose our self-awareness, to take on the perspective of Yeshua. To take on His vision, to take on His lifestyle. And in order to do this, I must lose myself, or as Rasha, as the Apostle Paul said, what? I must put myself to death. I must put my ego to death. I must lose my self-awareness so that I take on His awareness. Saying, I see things the way He sees things. Taking on the form of a slave, becoming the likeness of men, and being found in the appearance as a man, He humbled Himself and became obedient to the point of death, even the death on the cross. This is foundational. This is a foundational principle of being a true follower of Yeshua, of being a true follower of Jesus. This is foundational. This is why it says that the tzaddik is the foundation of the world. What is the foundation of the world? Exactly this, tzimtzum. That I make place, that I make room, that I limit myself to give others the space to grow. That I make place for others, that I make room for others. As we go into Netzach, some of the things that we're going to learn is this: that I limit myself, that I base myself. So that this is why Rav Shaul says, the Apostle Paul says, this is why he says, of all the sinners, I am the greatest. That we look at others as being, I'm not that I'm superior, but I am the inferior one. That you should appear to me. My perspective of you is that you are more important than I am. That your needs and your wants and your desire, the things of your life, are more important than mine. That any who would be a leader, Yeshua said, any who would be a leader must become the servant of all. Saying what? That I must make your life more important than my life. And in order to do that, I must be willing to sacrifice even to my own life for the sake of yours. Is this not what Yeshua did? Is this not what Yeshua did? He sacrificed His own life for my sake. If I'm following in His footsteps, if I am duplicating Him, then what? Then I also must be willing to forsake my life for the sake of yours. And in order to do that, I must be willing to humble myself, to live a life of humility. But in doing so, life does not become dark. And we will speak to this next week. Rather than life becoming dark, it becomes light. Because the humble become the light to the world. So with that we say, Rachot Shalom, Yelaila Tov.